Welcome to the second episode of Rocket Time, the Huntsville Rockets show, where this week the Rockets went full on NSYNC boy band mode and went bye 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 to the Tri City Outlaws, all in this week's episode of Rocket Time. Now it's time for the game recap, where the Huntsville Rockets are back. After starting the year 0-2, the Huntsville Rockets have won their past two games against the Tennessee Vikings and a dominating win against the Tri City Outlaws. And then here's the summary of the game. In the first quarter, on the first drive of the game, the Rockets had an interception on the Outlaws' first drive, and then in the middle of the quarter, whenever the Tri City Outlaws were driving that game, the Rockets had yet another interception. This time it was at the goal line, just to stop the Outlaws from scoring. And then in the second quarter, the Outlaws were driving yet again, who were one of the most dominant teams last week, winning 22-0 against the Mississippi Dogs. But then a fumble happened where the snap went above the quarterback, and the Rockets picked it up to be a turnover on downs. And then with 9 minutes and 5 seconds left, Rockets quarterback Chris Briscoe pass to wide receiver Trey Osmore for an 80-yard touchdown. This play was crazy because both players, both the offensive line and defensive line, and almost anybody out there on the field thought it was either going to be a false start or an offsides. None of those was called where the 80-yard touchdown counted. They did not make the two-point conversion, but we're up 6-0. The whole entire third quarter, to head into halftime, the score was 6-0. This game, the third quarter was just punting back and forth. There was no really big-time action. But then in the fourth quarter, with 7 minutes and 26 seconds left, quarterback Chris Briscoe passed to wide receiver Chauncey Greer for a 25-yard touchdown. And then wide receiver Andre Banks got the two-point conversion to make the score 14-0. And that's how they won. The final was Tri City Outlaws 0, Huntsville Rockets 14, as we blasted off to that win. The Gridiron Developmental Football League picked quarterback Kristen Briscoe, who passed for 2 passing touchdowns and 1 passing two-point conversion for their player of the game, for their GDFL player of the game. And then my key takeaways is the Rockets keep Outlaws scoreless for the first time this year. Of course, these two teams were technically supposed to play in June, but the Rockets just had different organizational issues where they weren't able to go, where then the Outlaws were awarded a victory in that one. And then turnovers are key. We had 2 turnovers that stopped Outlaws of big drives in this game, which could have honestly probably tied it up potentially in this game. And then my third takeaway is the Extreme North Division is now tied with both teams at the top with 2 wins, with the Outlaws being 2-1, and then the Rockets being 2-2. Of course, the Rockets played that extra game as the Beavers. It was Beavers versus the Racing Raiders, of course, but then they counted that one for the Rockets. And then the Rockets were up 12-0 in every single game so far that they've played. Of course, the first one against Racine, it was up 12-0, but then they ended up blowing that one. Last week they were up 12-0 against the Tennessee Vikings, but then ended up winning at the last second with 23 seconds left in that game. And then this week they were up 12-0, but then they got the two-point conversion. But we're up which ended up winning them 14-0. But it's just funny how they've been up, 14-0 in every single game. The one they lost, the other one they barely won at the last second, and this one was a dominating victory. And then my final takeaway is always pay attention. We learned the Outlaws learned this the hard way on that 80-yard touchdown whenever they were just standing there because they thought it was a penalty. It was not a penalty, and now they're already down 6-0. So that's my game recap and my key takeaways for this past week as we just dominated the Tri City Outlaws. Our next segment in this week's episode of Rocket Time is our game preview. Our upcoming game will be the Huntsville Rockets at the Missouri Silverbacks, Saturday, July 26th at 7 o'clock p.m. at St. Vincent Park in St. Louis. Our opponent is the Missouri Silverbacks. This is their first year in the Gridiron Developmental Football League and first year as a even semi-pro or professional team. They are 0-2 though, so it has not been a pretty first year so far for the Missouri Silverbacks. They have been outscored 79-6 this season so far. Their past games was week 1 they lost 41-6 to the Kansas City Bulldogs, and then last Saturday they lost 38-0 to the Tennessee Vikings. And then their only touchdown this year was in week 1, whenever kick returner Cody Williams returned a 95-yard kickoff return touchdown. So far this year has not been pretty for the Missouri Silverbacks. They've only scored 1 touchdown. They lost 41-6, 38-0, and it's just not looking good. So my prediction for this game is the Rockets will win 44-0. The Rockets right now look like one of the best teams in the league after beating the Tri City Outlaws and then the Tennessee Vikings, who are a pretty good team in the South Division, and also keeping it close against the Racine Raiders, who are a perennial national championship team up north, and they were, I'm pretty sure, 2-time champions, or they made two straight champions the last 2 years. And so I have the Rockets with just a dominating victory versus the Missouri Silverbacks. And that's all for our game preview. That's all for this week's episode of Rocket Time, where the Huntsville Rockets beat the Tri City Outlaws 14-0 in their home opener, a game that I was at. I had so much fun. The Rockets players were super nice, and if anyone wants to see the different pictures I took, it will be on my YouTube Shorts. It will be the most recent one, just to see some pictures of I took with the players, how I got my signed by a bunch of the players, and just a couple other pics from that game. But this week we have, to me, probably the easiest opponent in the league, the Missouri Silverbacks. Their first year in the GDFL has not gone good, so I'm expecting a domination from the Huntsville Rockets this weekend, as we potentially go to 3-2 in our first winning record of the year. Rocket timeouts, UFL Isaac out, and let's get ready to win. Let's get ready to beat the Missouri Silverbacks, and bye, Tri City Outlaws.